started my solar journey back in 2021 with 4 solar panels on my roof, which I covered in a video a while back. And then last year, I did a video showing how I added a solar pergola to my studio building. But what I didn't go into much in that video was that I also upgraded the solar system on the house. So much of what I'm about to show you was actually done over a year ago. I bought 12 of these used Jinko panels from Christopher Bean, a local reseller. These are 395 watts each, which is quite an upgrade from the 4 panels I had already. 3 of these panels actually ended up on my studio pergola, as you saw in the previous video. The other 9 were mounted on the roof of my house in place of the previous 4. So before with the 4 panels, I had a theoretical maximum of 1,120 watts, which was sort of irrelevant because the Bluetti unit I was using at the time had a maximum input of 720 watts. So that's the most I ever saw. My new panels now have a theoretical maximum of 3,555 watts, but to make proper use of this, I really needed to upgrade the Bluetti system. Now I wanted to go with EcoFlow, but at the time they did not have a system that could handle anywhere near this sort of power input. The Delta Pro units I have in my studio were the biggest thing they made. They only did up to 1,600 watts. So I retired my old Bluetti and sold it to a friend, and then I replaced it with the largest unit they made at the time. This one doesn't even have internal batteries. You have to connect external batteries to it, although this is nice because it's very expandable this way. This unit can accept up to 2,400 watts of solar power, which means I'm still slightly over-paneled. And what that means is there are going to be times of the day where my panels could make more power than I can use, but that's fine because take this example where it's very cloudy outside. I'm still able to produce at 50% of maximum, which is around 1,800 watts, and so that's still a lot. Now, one of the problems with a system like mine is that it is not grid-tied, and I specifically did not want to go with a grid-tied system because my primary goal was emergency preparedness. And since I can't store more than just a few kilowatt hours of power, that means any power I don't use relatively quickly is essentially lost. So I have to find creative ways to use the power. And since the largest consumption of energy is heating and air conditioning, that's usually where I focus on. So another obvious upgrade I needed to make was my window unit air conditioner. This unit has served me well for, a year and a half, I think. But when I bought this unit, my primary goal was finding the lowest power, most efficient air conditioner I could find, and that meant going with the 8,000 BTU version. But Midday also produces an identical unit that is 12,000 BTU, so I bought one of those, ironically with the hopes that it would use more power. I was also annoyed with this really long bracket that had been sticking out of the side of my house, so before installing the new air conditioner, I took the opportunity to trim this bracket, and this looks much more elegant now. And by the way, Pig Bunny really likes sitting at my desk right in front of the air conditioner. She likes to soak up the cold air, sometimes for hours on end. So for those that don't know, 12,000 BTU is equivalent to 1 ton when talking about a central air conditioner. So in theory, 4 of these window units should provide the same amount of cooling as my 4-ton central air conditioner. And here's where I want to go on a little rant. I have never quite figured out why central air conditioning systems are so expensive. Look at it this way. Imagine if I bought a total of 7 of these window units, and that's enough for every room in the house to have its own unit. This should be more powerful than my central air conditioner by a good margin. It would still only cost me around $2,800. But if I had to replace my central AC, it would run me somewhere around $10,000 these days. And the crazy part is that these window units are just not even the cheapest models. I mean, I could probably cut that number in half by buying the cheap ones. And to make things even more interesting, I'm pretty sure those Midday window unit air conditioners are actually more efficient than my central AC. And if one of them were to break down, the other 6 would still keep running, which means one room in the house might get a little warm, but I wouldn't have to evacuate my house because it's so hot. And as far as repair cost goes, the worst possible repair case for one of those units would be to replace the entire unit. Then you're looking at $400 to replace the unit, which you can do in an hour or less, actually. But these days, you're going to be paying $400 just to get a service call for your central air conditioning system, even if they don't fix anything. Another thing is the window unit air conditioner actually looks well engineered, and a lot of thought was put into it. And yet, the unit in my attic is basically just a sheet metal box held together with some screws and quite literally some duct tape. It also has this ridiculously badly designed emergency drain pan put underneath it. And so you'd think the cost would be the other way around. I mean, that's usually how economies of scale work. I mean, for example, if you needed to haul a bunch of cargo, it's going to be cheaper to buy a 40-ton semi-truck than it would be to buy 41-ton pickup trucks. It seems like the majority of cost on central AC systems is the labor to install and maintain them. And I think it's because people are essentially at the mercy of these air conditioning companies because people can't work on their own air conditioning systems. And I think also, when your air conditioner breaks in the middle of summer, people are desperate. They'll pay whatever it costs to get somebody out there to repair it quickly. Anyway, that's the end of my rant on air conditioning systems. Besides the house, I also upgraded the solar on the studio a bit. Originally, I had planned to have 2 panels on each of the EcoFlow systems, but then I found there was only room on the pergola for 3 of them. So I ended up splitting it like this, and then I said that I had planned to move all 3 panels to one unit and then get maybe 10 smaller panels to fill the gaps around the rest. And that's what I did. I started by adding 5 smaller panels around the 3 larger ones, and I got these panels from Amazon actually, and then I needed to find a place to put 5 more. So one day I was looking around at my fence behind the studio building, and I realized the fence faced south and seemed to always be receiving sunlight. So I made some custom brackets out of aluminum and hung these panels right on the fence. I had to space them out like this because otherwise the poles would cast shadows on the panels. The fence is really old and needing to be replaced, and when I replace it, I'll probably put the flat part facing south. Thus, I could group the panels together more elegantly. At the angle these 5 are mounted, they only produce about 65% of their maximum power, but that still works out to around 300 watts. Combine that with the 5 on the roof, and I'm realistically making around 700 watts here at the peak of the day. Combine that with the 900 watts I'm usually making on the other 3 panels, and that gives me 1600 watts at the peak for my studio building, which means on most days I can run the studio building on solar the whole day. Okay, so let's talk numbers on savings. I showed this electric bill for $547 in a previous video, and this was exactly a year ago. So I just got in this month's electric bill, and you can see it is $477, and I think it has been hotter than it was this time last year. Okay, so that's only $70. So I thought I'd look at some historical data on my electricity provider's website. So this is the last 12 months, and so I thought, let's see if I can see the 12 months before that, and sure enough, I can. So to make it easier to look at, let's look at the last 7 months overlaid with a year ago. So the blue is last year and the green is this year. There's no doubt about it, I've used less power from the grid since installing this equipment. Now you may be wondering why there's such a disparity between the colder months and the hotter months, and I know exactly what the difference is. During the winter, I can run several space heaters around the house to consume every bit of solar power I can make. But during the summer, all I have is this single window unit, which only consumes about half the power I can produce, if that. The rest of the power gets wasted. I really wanted to install a second window unit or a mini split somewhere in the house. That way I could use more of that power all the time. Unfortunately, my wife would not go along with that because she says they're ugly. So I have figured out one possible solution to this problem. If I can't run the air conditioner any harder, perhaps I could run the air conditioner longer. What I would need in order to do that is more battery capacity. That way I could store more of the power during the day and then be able to run the air conditioner all night long. But in order to do that, I would need to increase my battery storage more, which is going to be pretty expensive. So I think for the moment, I'm just going to leave it as is. So let's talk about the big test. So it's been about 3 years since the original 3-day power outage that kind of started this whole thing rolling. And we haven't had another power outage since, other than one we had last year that was just a few minutes long. So I haven't really been able to put this to a complete test. So ideally, I wanted to do this during the winter on one of the really cold days. That way it would more or less simulate what I went through a few years ago. The problem is, I also wanted to coordinate this with a day that my wife would not be around. And the problem with that is there's only just a few cold snaps we usually have in Texas, and they're kind of unpredictable. You never really know. I mean, they could fall in December, January, February, or even March sometimes. And but when there's not a cold snap, it's usually pretty nice temperatures during the winter. So unfortunately, it was just too difficult to coordinate doing the test during the winter. But then I thought about it. I'm like, hey, you know what? In the summertime, it's always hot. Every day it's hot, 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 hot. So it shouldn't be hard to coordinate a summertime test. So that's exactly what we're going to do. And just how hot is it? It's been hovering around 109 degrees Fahrenheit every day for several weeks now. For those of you in the rest of the world, that's 42.7 degrees Celsius. During this time of year, we don't even need a hot water heater. I mean, normally you think of the sink faucets as being hot and cold, but right now they're hot and warm. There is no cold water. You can cook eggs on the dashboard of your car, and if you were to walk on the street barefoot, you would burn your feet. It's so hot that if your air conditioner breaks down, the heat inside of your house could literally kill you. I went down to my storage unit to get something I needed. Okay, so this isn't maybe the final resting place, but certainly a very temporary resting place for a lot of my old projects. Unfortunately, there isn't much light in here, and I forgot to bring a light. But actually, what I came to get is my old Midday air conditioner, which I still have. And so what I've done is kept the old unit in my office room window, and I've installed the second unit in the dining room window. And so with these two units together, that gives me around 20,000 BTU, or about 1.7 tons. Anyway, so doing a test here, both units on low are pulling around 1100 watts. Pig Bunny is monitoring this one for me, but I'm going to bump it up to high. And this puts us around 1500 watts, and I really shouldn't go any higher than this because all the power right now is going through one cable. I should probably tap off some power to one of these other ports here. So I'll run this extension cord like so and take it over to the dining room unit. And Pig Bunny is going to monitor the cord in case it gets too hot. And so now I'm going to set the other unit to high, and let's see what we're pulling now. Looks like we're pulling a little over 2000 watts, so I think we're ready. Okay, so I got in a little surprise present from EcoFlow the day before the test. I didn't think this would actually make it here in time, but it did. So this is a portable air conditioner, but it won't be like any portable air conditioner you've probably ever seen. It's pretty small for a portable air conditioner, and here's what makes it really neat. It has 3 different types of power input, regular AC, solar power, or battery power. And speaking of batteries, here's the battery that goes with it. The battery is not required for operation, but if you want to use the solar input, you do need it. And that's because the battery is needed as a buffer since solar fluctuates a lot. But for the moment, I'm just going to charge it from AC power. Another interesting feature is it can also charge USB devices. So it has these various covers you can attach, and that's where the hoses can attach. So the idea is you can use a single hose and blow the cold air into something like a tent or car or shed or whatever, or you can use 2 hoses and move the unit inside and vent the hot air through the window. Now I'm very happy they offer a 2-hose solution for this. I actually despise the typical single hose portable air conditioner like this, and the reason is when you put it in a room and it blows the hot air out the window, well, that creates a vacuum, which means air has to be sucked in from somewhere, and most likely that somewhere is outside. Having 2 hoses means you can suck in the hot air to blow over the condenser coil and then blow that hot air right back outside, just like a window unit air conditioner would do. One problem is all EcoFlow provides for the window is this little do-it-yourself foam piece, and I really don't like this. So I ran over to my brother's shop and quickly built this little device out of wood. It folds open and has 2 holes for the hoses. I also added this little groove to the bottom, and you'll see why shortly. And then I put these little brackets on like so, and this allows me to twist lock the hoses into place just like they were intended to be. Okay, so I've decided to put this in my bedroom window. Originally I thought maybe I'd move one of the window units to the bedroom when it was time for bed, but now that I have this, I'll just use this instead. And so that little groove I made is to accommodate this protrusion here. And as you can see, I can fold it open and slide it right down, and there we go. That's a nice fit. So now I'll just attach the hoses, and here's what it looks like outside. It's behind the screen, so that'll keep the bugs out of the system, and possibly even rain, but there'll be no chance of that. If I were going to use this more than just one night, I'd probably weatherproof the wood, but it'll be fine for now. I went ahead and ran the AC on full blast just on battery power because I wanted to see how long it would go. I got 2.5 hours of runtime. I'm sure it would get more on lower setting, but I just wanted to find the worst case scenario for using the built-in battery. Okay, so I've gotten up at 6 o'clock in the morning. My wife and daughter are still asleep. Notice we did charge the cars last night. During the big winter power outage, I purposely didn't do this because they'd been pleading for Texans to conserve power, but I won't make that mistake again. So I'll turn on my portal light here and get started. Here goes. Wow, that was harder to flip than I was expecting. Anyway, let's go back inside. I will warn you, my house is not as clean as I'd prefer for doing a video, but it is what it is. So, going into my office room, there's still power in here, and that's because this room runs 24 hours a day on my solar system. So, I'm starting the day off with 83% on the battery. I'd prefer it to be at 100%, but this is pretty normal, being it has to run all my electronics all night long, and so I wasn't going to make a special exception for the test because I wanted it to be realistic. So the only other thing I'm going to do right now is start up this window unit in the dining room and to get a little cool air going. Then I'm going to go back to bed for a couple of hours. Okay, so it is 8 o'clock in the morning. My wife's going to be leaving shortly, and one of the things I need to do is use the manual override for the garage door to get it open. And the other thing I need to take care of is the refrigerator. It's been 2 hours without power, and if this were a real blackout situation, it would be around this point I would be thinking it's time to connect it to the battery. Unfortunately, that does mean running an extension cord to the other room, but there we go. The fridge has power again. And so, where am I at power-wise? Well, just that one air conditioner, the fridge, and some lights and computer stuff are using nearly 600 watts of power. But I only have around 100 watts coming in at the moment. Still, we're doing okay at 74% battery. Okay, now I'm going to turn my attention to the studio building. It's going to be completely without power. So yeah, it's pretty dark in here. The first thing I'll do is open these blinds, let a little light in. Then let's go in the other room and turn on the power. Yikes, it got dark. Okay, let's try that again with the phone light turned on. Okay, now I can see what I'm doing here. I'll start by powering up the EcoFlow systems. Let's turn off grid power, not that we had any in the first place. And then turn on solar. And now let's see if we can get a little light in here. And just for the record, we are at 100% here in the studio, but there's no solar generation yet, and we're just using a bit of power because I haven't started the air conditioner yet. I'm actually generating a decent amount of power already, far more than I'm using. And while I want to let that battery charge some, I think it's time to power on the second air conditioner, at least on low. And so this is how it stands now. Still making more than I'm using, so I'll let the battery charge a bit more before asking for more power. Oh, and I bought these temperature data loggers. I got the idea from watching a Technology Connections video where Alec was using one of these. And I've placed 4 of them around the house. Anyway, it's actually starting to get warm in the office. It's up to 77 degrees now. Okay, now it's time to go check on the studio situation. I will point out that all of my fence-mounted panels are still in the shade, as well as the pergola panels. They aren't going to generate much of anything until the sun moves over to the top of those trees. The temperature inside is not too bad yet, but it has started to rise, obviously. I think it's time to power on the air conditioner. If you add the two bottom numbers together, you'll see we're using about 800 watts from battery, but little to nothing is coming in yet from the sun. Probably won't be for another couple of hours. And guess what? I got another surprise delivery from EcoFlow, literally showing up the day of the test. I got this unboxed right away. It's supposed to be a 400 watt portable solar panel. And I'm going to put this over to the side of my house in the sun and see if I can get it to reach my little air conditioner in the bedroom. I had to cut a little slit in the wood here so I could get the cable through the window. And now I'm about to see if my MC4 extension cable that I had on hand will actually reach this far. And dang, it's going to be close. Very close, but I reached. I raised them up with some chairs to see if I could get a better angle to the sun, but also allow some ventilation under them. Pig Bunny has been waiting for me to power this thing on, so I obliged. With any luck, I could run this all day alongside the other two. So initially I was confused by the readings on the EcoFlow app. I mean, for example, here it says input is 0, but what I realized is this is just showing the battery state, so there's no power going into the battery, but there is 43 watts going out of the battery. So I had to power the unit off completely to see how much solar I was getting, and now you can see 174 watts going in. So hopefully that will increase as the sun rises in the sky. And now it's actually time for lunch.
Okay, so it's only like 10:30. I don't normally eat lunch this early, but to be fair, I also don't usually get up at 6 o'clock in the morning either. So I guess I'm off my schedule today. So I decided to make just a sandwich for lunch because it's not that I can't cook anything. I mean, there are things and ways I can cook things, but all of those things are going to involve diverting power from something else and creating more heat, which I really just don't want to do. However, when dinner time comes around, I have some interesting thoughts on that, so we'll come back to that in a few hours.
And now I get to be like one of those influencers that takes pictures of their food. Look, it's a sandwich. Well, so how's it going? Well, honestly, not bad. Quite a bit better than I thought, actually. I mean, it's like 105 outside. It hasn't even reached the peak heat of the day, but it's still, it's pretty hot and the sun's been out for a while. I've been running at least 6 hours without any grid power. And I mean, the house is still like 72 degrees in most every room, even the back rooms. That's what's really surprising me. I thought the back rooms that aren't exposed to any of the window units would be getting hot by now, but they're not. But that's probably because the sun, when it reaches that side of the house here in a couple hours, that side of the house will start getting hot. So we'll see how that goes. As far as our overall status, I'm currently generating around 2100 watts and I'm using most of that. The battery is almost completely recharged as well. So we're doing well here. The EcoFlow air conditioner has also been doing well. The battery's at 99% and is still going great, although I do have it in eco mode now. I temporarily shut it off so I could see how much power the solar panel was producing, and it was 263 watts. In the studio, I'm now making more power than I'm using, and the batteries are starting to recharge, hopefully back to 100%. But other than that, I've spent the last few hours working on some code for the Commander X16. So I don't think there's going to be really a lot to report for the next several hours. Basically, I'm just going to be working on my code and periodically just checking the levels on everything because obviously the strategy for today is that I want to use as much solar power as possible to keep the house and the studio building cool. But at the same time, I don't want to use too much because I want to make sure the batteries are at 100% when the sun goes down. And so I'm going to have to be monitoring that real closely, especially a few hours from now. Yeah, I'll check back in like 3 or 4 hours. We'll see how things are going. Okay, this is where things are about to start getting interesting. The data logger in the garage is reading 107 in the shade, but it's starting to get hot in certain rooms of the house, as you can see here. And it's even starting to feel a bit uncomfortable in the kitchen and living room. The problem is I've passed peak solar for the day and now production is on the decline. In order to keep the battery charged, I'm going to have to unfortunately start reducing my power consumption, even though right now I really wish I could increase it. I also realized the portable solar panel was now in the shade, so I had to move it to collect a bit more sun for the evening. But I don't think this will last long because there won't be any sunlit area in the reach of the cord soon. But I'm ready for something else to eat, so I decided to make some Frito pie. And on the bright side, this canned chili is shelf stable and it should be safe to eat cold if I had to, but I think I can warm it up. I'm just going to wrap this in some plastic wrap to keep the bugs out and the heat in. And I'm going to put it out in my regular retrobrighting spot on the sidewalk. We're starting off with a temperature of around 80 degrees, and I came back 30 minutes later and measured 125 degrees. I think it's warm enough to eat. I did eventually have to put some tape on here because the plastic wrap kept coming loose, but yeah, the cheese is melted. Let's try it. I wouldn't know that it wasn't cooked in some normal way. Technically, it's starting to cool off, but it has now reached almost 110 degrees in the garage in the shade. Some of the back rooms have gotten into the 80s, and I moved the portable panel again to get it out of the shade. This probably won't last more than half an hour. I've reached the point where I'm now using more power than I'm making, so I have to turn off one of the window units. I've also reached that point in the studio building.
It's still very comfortable in here temperature-wise. I mean, it's like 72 degrees in the entire building. The problem is I know I'm on borrowed time at this point because, it's only a matter of time until the power runs out from the batteries. That could be 2 hours, it could be 6 hours. I'm not sure, but the studio is not going to last through the night. There's just no way.
In fact, I've decided to change strategy here. I'm going to unplug the window unit and use that power to go to the refrigerator, and then I'm going to take this longer extension cord and bring it all the way to the bedroom to power the EcoFlow unit.
So at this point, I've given up on the idea of a completely cool house, and I'm taking refuge, kind of like my last stand here in the bedroom, which is where I plan to spend the night, obviously. So my goal is to divert all power to keeping this room cool.
And so the idea is this is running on power from the main solar system now, but if that runs out, which it probably will, then I know from yesterday's experiment that I can get a few more hours from the internal battery. Okay, so it's 8 o'clock in the evening and the sun's starting to set. So it's getting dark in the house, except for the rooms that are connected to my solar setup, which have light. Amazingly, I'm still making 4 watts. Make that 5 watts of power, but from here on out, it's battery power only. I have turned off both of the window units in this part of the house. As such, it's up to 82 degrees in my office now. I have no lights in the bedroom, but the EcoFlow unit is still running as it's the only thing getting power now, besides the refrigerator. However, even on full blast with the door closed, I can't seem to cool the bedroom beyond 76 degrees. It's quite a different picture in the studio building. I have full lights and air conditioning. It's even a nice 72 degrees inside. But the main difference is I'm not planning to spend the night in here, so I can run the power full blast until it shuts off. And when will that be? I estimate I can make it until midnight out here. Well, it's 11 o'clock at night now, and my wife is arriving home from her event. And I think I'm going to be ending this experiment early for a couple of reasons. One thing is the studio just lost power right at 11 o'clock. The left unit here ran out first, but without both units running, I can't power anything in here because I need 240 volts. In the house, my office room has reached 84 degrees. In fact, most of the house is stabilized around 84 degrees. In the bedroom, even on full blast, I still can't get the temperature below 76 degrees. So I'm 17 hours into my 24-hour test. I can estimate how the rest of it would go without forcing my wife to endure it. On the bright side, I'm still around 50% on battery. I estimate I could go another 3 or 4 hours, which means I'll lose power to the refrigerator and the air conditioner around 2 o'clock in the morning. However, the air conditioner has its own battery that would take over and give me another 3 hours, meaning I could keep the bedroom at least 76 degrees until around 5 o'clock in the morning, putting me really close to that 24-hour goal.
Okay, this test is officially over. Man, that is hard. All right. Woo! We got power.
I also switched all of these back to grid power because I wanted to crank up all 3 window units along with the central AC to cool this place down. And now let's look at some graphs from the data loggers. This is the graph from the back room in the house, furthest from any air conditioners. That sharp increase you see near the middle is around the time I realized I should probably shut the door to that room. Here's the living room. It looks like it was just getting progressively hotter throughout the day. And here's my office room. The big dip at the bottom was from when I first turned on the window unit in there around 10 o'clock when I first started getting good solar power. And then you can see when I switched it from high to low around 4 o'clock to start conserving power. Clearly low was not enough BTU to keep the temperature stable. And then you can see when I totally shut it off around 6 o'clock, the temperature skyrocketed. And the last graph to show is this one from the garage. And now, this is where I need to explain something about how graphs and statistics can be used to deceive people. And while I certainly was not attempting to deceive here, the way these graphs are generated, they're not all to the same scale. And so I exported the data and created my own graph and overlaid them all. And this is what I came up with. Seeing them all at the same scale really paints a different picture. Sure, it got stuffy in the house, but compared to outside, it was really not that bad. And on that note, I would like to point out that everything in life is relative compared to something else. So the question is, if this had been a real power outage, how would I have compared to all of the other people in my neighborhood? So I did learn a few interesting things during this test. One thing is, I'm pretty sure I can handle a 16-hour power outage with no problem. Granted, a multi-day power outage would be a little bit of a struggle, but again, relative to everybody else in my neighborhood, I would actually be doing pretty well. I should also point out that had the weather been nicer, then a multi-day power outage would actually be no big deal. In fact, there have been times I've run this building here for over a week just on solar power without ever switching back to grid, but those were on days when it was like 75, 80 degrees outside. And, the reality is power outages pretty much rarely ever happen on good weather days, so it's almost a moot talking point. So the third thing that is an interesting takeaway from this test is I realized that if I wanted to build a house like out in the middle of nowhere and live completely off grid, which by the way, I have absolutely no desire to do, but if I did, then I know that I would need to triple the number of solar panels that I have and triple the amount of battery capacity that I have in order to make sure that I would have power 24 hours a day under any circumstance. And one last little interesting tidbit is that once I restored power to the house, I turned on all 3 window units full blast as well as the central air conditioner. So I had 4 air conditioners running, and it took until midnight, basically an hour, in order to bring the temperature back down in the house to a nice 72 degrees. Anyway, so while you guys are here, assuming anybody's actually still watching at this point, I have a couple of announcements. First thing is just to let you know that this beautiful Commander X16 t-shirt, these are now available on my website, so along with this neat little Commander X16 mouse pad. So if you want one of those, you can go over there and pick one up. I also have Pesky Robots t-shirts available, and on the topic of pesky robots, that brings me to announcement number 2. I keep getting emails from people asking me if or when pesky robots will ever be available on Steam. And the answer is, it's already there. It actually has been for months. So if that's something you're interested in, then knock yourself out. But anyway, that's it for this episode. So as always, thanks for watching.